All righty. Well, thank you all for coming out this morning. Really appreciate it, getting here bright and early for us to talk about the wonderful world of digital royalties. We'll go ahead and give ourselves a little bit of an introduction here. We'll go down the line a little bit, and then we'll dig into what we've got. Can be a pretty dense topic, so we may not get to everything that we want to get to in the 50 minutes we got here, but we're going to do our best, and definitely encourage everyone to have questions, put them in the Q&A at the end so we can, really get to what you want to hear about and all that good stuff. So I'll start. My name's Kevin Fagan. I'm the Senior Director of Recorded Administration at BMG Rights Management down in Nashville. Graduated from this fine university in 2017 from the music business program and moved down to Nashville in 2018. Started working at Peer Music, processing publishing royalties. Came over to BMG, been there for 6 years now, running our artist royalties department for the U.S. team. So it's been quite the experience, and really looking forward to this discussion. Feels great to be back here, and I'll pass it over to Sean.
Hey, everybody. I'm Sean McNamara. I am the Director of Publisher Services at the Mechanical Licensing Collective, or the MLC. I'll get this out of the way. I'm the only one on this stage that is not an alum of OU, and I am not from Ohio, so please don't ask me too much about Ohio sports. I don't know. I'm also based in Nashville. Before my time at the MLC, I spent a few years with the Orchard in neighboring rights, and I started my career at the Harry Fox Agency, kind of the pre-MLC gurus of mechanical licensing. So that's what I'll be focusing on today.
Oh. You want to go or you want me to go, Sam? I'll go.
Okay.
You can go last.
Okay.
Hi, my name's Tim Pattison. I graduated from here in '03. This program was very different then. It was just a general audio production program. I moved to New York. I got my master's in music technology. All of these technical things that I don't use in my day-to-day career these days because I ended up in the music business. I started in publishing, where I spent roughly 8 years doing mostly A&R. Moved over to an indie label for a year. And then after that, I ended up at BMI, which is where I've been for the last 10 years. And I currently, my position is Senior Director of Creative there.
Hi, everyone. My name is Samantha Rainey. I graduated from OU, MPRI represent in 2021. And yeah, I have been with Universal Music Publishing Group ever since. I kind of started out doing the nitty-gritty royalty processing, and now I've moved over to more of an analyst position, looking a lot at royalties from a global perspective. So that's a quick little summary of me. I'm from Cleveland, too, if anybody else is a Cleveland person out there. But yeah.
All righty. Well, thank you guys for the introductions. Appreciate it. And we will get started with our regularly scheduled programming. So today we're going to be getting into sort of the inherent rights and royalties associated with those rights that are inherent to any sort of holding any sort of copyright, especially when it comes to compositions, which is what we're going to mainly focus on today. We will try to get into sound recordings at the end. Compositions are, I would say, way more complicated, maybe less intuitive, so that's what we'd like to focus on today. The second you write a song, the second you record a song, you're granted these rights by law, essentially. You've got your reproduction rights, derivatives, public display, public performance, distribution, and digital transmission. Those 6 rights are inherent for all compositions, for all sound recordings, and as a result of that, you're entitled to royalties. And we want to make sure that everybody here understands that, or understands where you need to go to get these royalties, and properly, make sure that you're properly accounted for, your intellectual property. It's important. That's what, this industry is built on. That's what, all of you, if you're a songwriter, recording artist, that's how you're hoping to make your bread and butter and make a living doing this stuff. And we will start things off by talking about, like I said, on the composition side of things, sort of at the very base level, registrations. You'll hear that word a lot. Once you're in the sort of I would say the sphere that when you're writing songs, when you're trying to get your things out there, making sure your works are registered with the United States Copyright Office, and then, further to that, registered with your PROs, with the MLC, all that good stuff. So I think I'll open it up to, anybody here, if you want to, jump in about what the process of registering with the United States Copyright Office looks like, and what sort of things are involved. What do you need? What do you not need? When is it important to do that? Sort of things along those lines.
Well, I think it's pretty critically important from day one. They used to teach you that you want to fix your composition. People used to pull what they call the poor man's copyright, where they would literally write lyrics on a sheet of notebook paper, mail it to themselves, and there was record of you having created the song. But that doesn't really hold up as well. So you do want to make sure that your compositions are registered with the Copyright Office, because that is kind of where everything starts. We see that a lot at the MLC, right? There's disputes every day over whose song is it, who did the lyrics, who did the music, and kind of staking your claim to your composition as early as possible helps you protect your rights from day one, and you would be surprised at how useful that is on day 1,000 as well. So yeah, get in touch with the Copyright Office. It's pretty easy these days. I think that'll be the recurring theme when we talk about work registrations across the board, whether it's at BMI or if it's at the MLC or at the Copyright Office. Online forms are key. You like an Excel spreadsheet, somebody's got one to fill out with all of your information. Get that stuff on file.
It's very true.
Yeah, I'll just jump in and say it's the most important thing you can do as a songwriter, an artist, producer, making sure your stuff is registered and registered properly, because we deal with it all the time. People that have had music out and they've got, whether you get 100,000 streams or 100 million streams, if the song isn't registered properly with BMI or with the MLC or even with your publisher, you guys should be registering stuff for people. So, but yeah, it's really important, and it's super easy. It's not a complicated process. It can become complicated the further you get into your career when you're talking about co-writing and splits and all that stuff, and I don't want to get too much into the weeds here, but it is the most important thing you can do as somebody who's releasing music, and it's super easy. Like we were saying, it's like you just go online, sign up to your PRO, you sign up to the MLC, you register your songs. All you got to know is if you're writing with other people, who they're registered with. Well, not at the MLC, at BMI or ASCAP or wherever your PRO is throughout the world. Just knowing who your co-writers are and where they're registered, and that's the simple information. We have a great YouTube tutorial on our website that literally walks you through it step by step, but it's a pretty straightforward process.
Yeah, I think it's the PROs, the MLC, everybody wants you to have your things registered because it makes everybody else's lives way easier. And these organizations exist whose sole purpose is to make sure you're paid and accounted properly. So they don't want to, like you said, great YouTube tutorials, all that stuff. That information's online. They want you to be able to do this. They want this to be accessible for everybody. And yeah, I think it's a good segue into public performance royalties. As I'd sort of mentioned at the top here, it's part of those, sort of 6 inherent rights with the copyright that you're granted. One of them is public performance. And so these performance rights organizations, your BMI, ASCAP, CSAC, they exist to collect this income and to pass it along to you, provided everything is registered properly. And yeah, I think I'll pass it to you, Tim. Maybe in your own words, since you've been in there, what do you feel like is the main function of the performance rights organization? How do you feel like the whole process works from start to finish in terms of collecting this income for writers and then distributing it to them?
Try to be as succinct as I can, because it does get it can get complicated. But I think from start to finish, like I said, registering and making sure stuff. If you don't register your stuff, your music, you're not going to get paid. That's that simple. And that's the most important thing, and what I try to tell young songwriters, artists, producers, to make sure you're signed up and get your stuff registered. From there, the way we work as a company, we have a licensing department, and their sole job is to go negotiate on our songwriters' behalf everywhere that uses music. And it's not, we are a performing rights organization, and it commonly is a public performance, but it's everywhere music is used. So whether it's digital on your Spotify, YouTube, Apple, or it's audio video where music is being used on Disney Plus and Netflix and stuff of that nature, and then it's still commercial radio, like probably none of you in this audience listen to the radio in your car traditionally, but that still pays money. Satellite radio, bars and restaurants, live music. So if you're playing at venues in town, like you can get paid for those performances. And so what our licensing team does is they go out and negotiate this with all of these entities, and then those come into us as royalties, and then we have a whole team of admin and distribution that go through this and then spit that out to you as royalties. And you can see where those are being used, how you're tracking. We have an awesome online kind of like analytics tool that like lets you see where your music's being used throughout the world, what your top songs are, what your earnings look like, where you're projected to go based on what you did last year, stuff of that nature. So that's kind of like everything in a nutshell.
Yeah.
I could get way granular, but I'll stop there.
Yeah, I think sort of as an extension to that, as you mentioned, there's a very large admin teams of folks at, these performance rights organizations that, work to make sure that all the income that they collect can be processed and distributed properly, which is key. Generally speaking, maybe this is specific to BMI. I'm not super familiar with, the other PROs, but like, what's the distribution cycles generally look like? A lot of the times I hear questions from either songwriters or like a producers who they see their work get used somewhere. Their publisher worked it, they got a sync or a, some sort of placement in like a Netflix show, but then they don't get paid for X amount of months or whatever, and it can be a little bit confusing.
Yeah, I mean, typically, like from the time something gets used or played, depending on where it is in that cycle, it's anywhere from 6 to 9 months. With digital stuff, we're getting better about condensing that time frame because we're getting things faster and we're able to process them quicker, just based on technology, which has been great. But the pay cycle is we do quarterly payouts, so 4 times a year. And I think it's the same. You guys do quarterly as well? The MLC?
Do monthly, actually.
Oh, you do monthly?
Oh, wow.
Wow. Okay.
Stepping up. That's worth applause.
And we haven't missed one yet.
There you go. Well, cool. I think the other thing that I hear is sort of a common question in regards to, especially public performance royalties. Geez, gotta get that one out. Is the differentiation between like writer share and publisher share. The PROs have an obligation to pay both of those shares out, and a lot of the time, especially new songwriters, that is especially confusing where they're saying, I'm not a music publisher. Why, what is this publisher share? How am I entitled to collect it? Do I need to create my own LLC to get involved and start doing this? Or is it as easy as just giving them my W-9 and telling them I'm a publisher? So what does that process kind of look like?
I mean, you can do any and all of those things.
Yeah.
So at BMI, we allow you to register your stuff without setting up a publishing entity. But I recommend that if you're releasing music, that you do set a publisher up from the get-go because it just makes things easier, especially when you get down the road and you do sign to a publisher. It makes people like Sam's job a lot easier because then they're not scrambling to have you set up a publisher to then they're adminning it. But yeah, setting up a writer and a publisher from the get-go is generally the way you should do it, and it's super easy. Everything is done online. And what it means is setting up a publisher is like when you write a song, you are the owner, and publishing equals ownership. So if I write a song by myself, I'm 100%. Well, at BMI we work on a 200% scale. I know it gets a little tricky. So there's 100% on the writing side and 100% on the publishing side. But if you write that song by yourself, you're 100% the writer, 100% the publisher. If you start co-writing with other people, it depends on how you split that up. But both sides equal 100. And what the publishing side is ownership. So you're the owner until the day comes in which you enter into a publishing agreement, whether it's an admin deal or a co-publishing deal, then you're giving up rights on the publishing side, but we'll always pay you your writer share to you directly. The publisher doesn't touch the writer share. You just enter an agreement on the publishing side, which if you're going into a co-pub agreement, you're co-publishing that with them, so they're co-owning your works with you. But you still get your writer side directly from BMI. I don't know, did that kind of cover what
Absolutely,
you were looking
yeah,
for?
and I think that's key, and
Yeah.
that, just because, you may not consider yourself a publisher or whatever, that's just the terminology, that's just the phrasing. You are entitled to that money until, like you said, you split the ownership with someone else, you decide that it's time to get a publishing deal to where they can, work the catalog for you, all that good stuff, and that's when it becomes split, but you're still always entitled to your writer share, provided you don't, sign some crazy agreement and give that up elsewhere. But I think that's, a good sort of succinct summary of public performance, what all's involved there, the players, the income sources, all that good stuff. We're going to shift to mechanical royalties now, which is, Sean's area of expertise here. And those 6 rights that I talked about earlier, this is pertaining to reproduction. So this is, as a result of in this case, we're talking about compositions, your song getting reproduced and what you're entitled to by that being reproduced physically, digitally, and, especially in the case of what the MLC is collecting for, streaming, which is obviously very important in this day and age. So I'll pass it over to Sean. I know you're probably good at giving this pitch by now, considering how young the MLC is and everything, but what is the Mechanical Licensing Collective? Why do they exist? And why should everyone care about making sure they're registered?
Of course, because number one, we probably have money for you, so please come get it because we don't want to hang on to it. You're right, we are kind of the new kid on the block. We were created in 2018 with the passage of the Music Modernization Act. I feel like it's always kind of been an industry struggle to take mechanical licensing, which started with piano rolls, hence the mechanical part of things, and figure out what to do with them digitally. And so the Copyright Office created us. We went into effect January 1st, 2021, and we collect digital streaming mechanical royalties from all eligible DSPs operating within the United States. So what does that mean? That was a lot of words. Probably too many. If your stuff is being streamed on, let's say, Apple Music or Tidal or Spotify in the U.S., all of that usage has to come through the MLC to get paid. So for you, if you are a publisher or, as we were just talking about, a self-administered songwriter, you haven't entered into an agreement with a publisher, you're collecting these royalties on your own, we probably have it for you. So come register your works. Keep going back to work registrations. It is everything with the MLC. It's one of our core tenets. We ask our members to play their part, and that's literally just making sure that we have your songs. When you break it down, our kind of monthly process is a pretty simple one at the end of the day. You register your songs in our database. We get monthly usage data from all of the DSPs. We mash it all up together. And then the usage you're due, we pay to you. So long as your works are in our database, we'll pay you for it. But I think one of my favorite parts about the MLC is how transparent we are, which was a core tenet of our creation through the Copyright Office. But we will go so far as to highlight works in our database that are not claimed at 100%. So you can search, if you have a co-writer that maybe registered their 50% in our database a year ago, you don't have to go through the rigmarole of registering it new, creating duplicates. You could just say, hey, that's my 50%, give it to me. Same thing with recordings, right? All of the DSPs submit all of their own data. They could spell things wrong, and maybe something doesn't get matched correctly to your work. We also have a tool that allows you to go in and say, hey, that's my ISRC, give it to me. We solely exist to pay creators the royalties that they're due from usage of their songs. We don't take a cut. We don't take any sort of percentage or any sort of fees. It all goes straight to the creators. So you as creators should get in touch with us and make sure that that you're set up to get all of your mechanicals. That's all we're here to do.
Yeah, and I think that's a good way to phrase it. That that is literally all you're there to do.
That's it.
You were created by essentially obviously the copyright board. It's not a private business that you're being forced to interact with. They exist to make it way easier for you to collect rather than you having to go to all these DSPs directly and try to negotiate that themselves. DSPs have no interest in doing that. That's what the MLC's for. They got one place to go to make sure that all that is accounted for. And another point that you touched on that I do think is worth, I would say reinforcing, is that metadata, things on the back end, song titles, ISRCs, writer names, even splits sometimes can be wrong, and that information can come from a lot of different sources, places like the PROs, even the publishers, MLC. They're getting data from a lot of different places, and I do think that it's important for you as a songwriter or a recording artist to be confident that the data that you provide is 100% accurate, so that it doesn't get lost in the sauce with everything else, and you always know, and you're on top of it, that what I'm providing is accurate. I can, hang my hat on that and know that if there's any disputes, if anything weird comes up, someone else that I, maybe it was a co-writer, or maybe the DSP's got something wrong and your distributor, the metadata wasn't correct on the distributor's end when it got out there, that what you've got is accurate and you can hang your hat on that and, have something to stand behind should something ever arise or whatever. Sean, could you speak a little bit about, and I'm happy to jump in on this too, familiar with mechanical royalties in previous roles, about mechanical royalties related to non-streaming income. Obviously, the MLC isn't really involved in collecting that at all. Is that what does that process look like in terms of how you can get it accounted for? People still printing vinyl these days and making CDs and all that good stuff.
That's right. Even cassettes.
Cassettes.
Every cool little indie label puts out cassettes on Bandcamp.
Yep.
So you're right that the MLC doesn't work with anything but digital streaming royalties, but that is not the only mechanical license or mechanical royalty out there in the world for CDs, vinyl, cassettes. That all comes with a mechanical royalty stream, right? Most of that, I think, runs these days through the Harry Fox agency, which we work with. I like to call them kind of our cousin company. They help us process some of our data, but they do all of their own mechanical licensing as well. That works a little bit differently than the MLC. The MLC works under what's called the blanket license. So, in essence, you don't have to go get an individual license for every stream and every song that's on a DSP or every song that you put out, right? That would be kind of nuts. And it's the reason why we were created. Before 2018, there wasn't quite an understanding of how to take this nebulous digital usage and make it work with individual licensing, because that is still how it works on the physical side. So if I was to say, record a cover of a U2 song, right? I would need to go get a mechanical license for me to release it on CD, on cassette, on vinyl. That's all run through places like the Harry Fox agency. So it's a little more individual based on the usage, on the release, whereas the MLC, once you're kind of registered with the MLC, the DSP has filed to use what's called the blanket license, and everything is paid out under there. We don't go so individual like you need in other sources.
Yeah, and that's a good point, especially where, my experience in working at a label, I previously worked on mechanical royalties on the label side at BMG, and that's when we're releasing music on either it be a physical format or also, alternatively, a digital download rather than a stream. Downloads don't apply to the blanket license. It's up to the label, it's up to whoever the rights owner is to obtain that mechanical license from the songwriter. And pay out at a, most likely statutory rate. It's a rate that is set by the copyright board that has, it's gone up in previous years after being stagnant for God knows how long, 20 plus years. Oh, yeah. So that's great. I think it's up to, 12.7 cents now? Awesome. It's up to the labels and the copyright owner to make sure of the sound recording, to make sure that they are obtaining the mechanical license to pay the songwriters when the track is reproduced. So, I mean, that's sort of I would say, a nutshell what mechanical licenses are about. Mechanical is reproduction. Whenever someone consumes, whether it be via purchase, creation, stream, you are entitled to royalties for those uses. And I think that's the main takeaway there, is that it is, it's inherent. These organizations exist to make sure that that income gets to you in the most efficient way possible. So we'll move on down the line to publishing. And Sam, I think publishing as a whole, as a concept, can be a little nebulous. I think that it can be a little confusing for people to understand why would I give up 50% ownership in my copyrights to go sign with a publisher? What are they going to be doing for me that makes this worth my time? All that sort of good stuff. So I think from your end, what would you sort of say to those questions in terms of what does a publisher do? Mm-hmm. Why would anybody be interested in getting a publishing deal? And sort of what comes with all of that?
For sure. So music publishers, we are around to kind of help you manage and monetize the rights to your compositions. We act as sort of like an intermediary between songwriting and the industry, and we're kind of around to help, promote, market, license all of your royalty or your songs to help you collect royalties for your songs. So I would say, you'd probably want to consider a publishing deal if you're getting a substantial amount of plays, and you can't really handle it on your own anymore. I would say that is a good time for a publisher to step in if you're getting a substantial amount of performances, recordings, just anything that is generating money. We want to help you get that, but we also want to take a cut of that too. A common industry standard for publishing is a 50-50 split of that publishing royalty. So I also, just to piggyback on some of the things too that you guys were touching on with registrations and having that metadata be correct. I had spent a lot of time just processing these royalties coming in, and if information is not matching what we have in our database with the information that's coming in, we won't match that income, and you won't get paid for that money. So there really is a big incentive for you to have that confidence in the information that you are putting forward with your music. And what else did we want to? Did I?
No, I mean,
did I cover some of that?
Yeah, absolutely did
Okay.
cover some of that. Yeah, I think my biggest takeaway and sort of in that same vein is, when it gets to be, you really want to. You've got the catalog. You've got your, your streaming. Mm-hmm. You want to focus on music, and you want to focus on what you love to do. I'm assuming write songs, record songs, all that good stuff. Partnering with the publisher really sort of, it sort of offloads that burden, I would say, from you of, in terms of the, just the sheer accounting work that can come with a lot of that stuff and collecting everything. And B, they have creative teams. They have, the admin sort of, backbone. That's probably not the best way to phrase it, but the admin, power to work your music for you. And that's the thing is they're going to be looking for new opportunities for these compositions, I should say, to generate revenue. They have an incentive to do that. And by result, you have an incentive to partner with that and take advantage of that with the connections network, all that exists.
You never know, too. Your song could blow up in another country, and we have those connections. We have those partnerships already in place, and we can help you work with, we will work with foreign companies and PROs, and we will get those royalties for you. So.
And so basically, when it comes to your work registrations, do you want to fill out the Excel spreadsheet, or do you want Universal
Yes.
to? But you're going to have to make sure that she has your right data.
I'll jump in and be the Debbie Downer here. You don't look for a publishing deal. Publishers find you,
Yeah.
just to be very clear. If you don't go shop your, I mean, there
could.
there are few instances where that happens, but it's not common to go knocking on Universal's door and be like, I'm ready for a publishing deal. So just to not, I just want to be clear.
Yeah, sometimes you're told that you're ready for a publishing deal when it's it's obvious that there's a reason that they're knocking on your door. Yeah, I think in terms of I mean, you sort of touched on it there in terms of like foreign collections and like with foreign performance rights organizations outside of the United States. What do you feel like outside of obviously? Publishers are collecting income from performance rights organizations. They're collecting income from the Mechanical Licensing Collective, mechanical royalties paid from labels, distributors, all that good stuff. What do you see as those other sort of revenue sources? Is it mainly? Do you feel like it is mainly foreign collections, especially where you can, where a publisher can really shine in that regard? Are there other sort of revenue sources that you see? That frankly, someone may not have access to without those publishing connections.
I think, I think that a lot of what I'm seeing currently in what's coming in from a global perspective is honestly, and this is probably going to be a good segue to, is like sync and a lot of royalties that are pertaining to honestly live performances too. Live performances in sync, we really see a lot of high generating revenue from that, and I think that's going to be a good kind of segue into what we want to talk about next. Sync royalties.
Sync is definitely I think the maybe what's the best way to phrase it? Like the highest profile, sort of like the hotness in general in terms of generating revenue, both from your compositions and sound recordings. Because especially if you're writing and recording things by yourself, sync licenses require a license for both the composition and the sound recording, which I think is really important. It's the part of it that publishers can help you with, especially if you're signed to a label deal on the sound recording side, they're going to be helping you out with all that stuff. But that's the key thing is there's two revenue streams there associated with a synchronization license, whether it be TV, film, video games, what have you. That's what it's all about. And those rates are, unlike, the rates that are there for mechanical royalties, where they're, statutory, they're established. Unlike, maybe more so like, licenses that are negotiated from like the PRO's perspective, that these rates are negotiated. There's nothing set in stone. There can be precedent. There can be, certain publisher, certain label, or whatever the case may be. They have their formula of what they're going to ask for this type of use, all this good stuff like that. That stuff matters. But at the end of the day, it is something that is negotiated. And whenever you need something negotiated, it's great to have a good partner and a good team around you that can do that negotiating on your behalf, and something that you can trust in that regard. So I don't know if anyone else here has any thoughts on like sync, whether it be, where we're seeing that going, the frequency, the pervasiveness of, and how important that is to revenue streams.
I'll just jump in and say that like a sync can help propel your career or extend your career. getting a good, and especially if you have someone negotiating great on your behalf, like you can get a $10,000 use in a TV show or a $50,000 use in a trailer. But what I will say is, if you get a use in a TV show, whether it's digitally or on commercial TV, we pay on the back end. You get an upfront fee, as Kevin was talking about, but then you're getting performance on the back end. So every time that is used, you get a rate paid to you as a royalty from your PRO, both as a songwriter and a publisher, if you're self-published. So
Yeah,
just
I think that's a great point. Yeah, and speaks to the fact that yes, it's a nice boost, but there also is the tail, and so those things add up over time.
not on film in America though,
Yeah.
sadly.
Yeah, and I think that's definitely also worth mentioning. That yes, there's still some. We'll get into some of this. I think we'll have time to chat about sound recordings here in a little bit. There's still some quirks when it comes to U.S. rights and royalties associated with them. So definitely good to highlight things like that. Any other thoughts on sync before we kind of dive into sound recordings?
I mean, my only 2 cents on that is, it can also then be used as a driver for the rest of your royalty streams. We see it every day at the MLC that some song blew up because it was in a White Lotus episode, and so now 3 months later, somebody has a huge spike in their Apple Music royalties. So definitely another useful avenue for a career, can help drive everything.
Agreed.
Yeah, awesome. Well. Sweet. We will keep this thing trucking along then. That is a good sort of segue into sound recordings, insofar as that is a part of the whole synchronization process. You need to license the sound recording and the composition. Sound recordings are, I would say, slightly less complicated conceptually in terms of how royalties are accounted. It's not quite as nebulous as something like publishing. There's no writer's share versus publisher's share, and there's not all these, different agencies that you need to get involved with. That being said, there is one that you should be involved with, which is Sound Exchange. So sort of hearkening back to those rights that are inherent to your compositions and your sound recordings, your intellectual property, public performance, what the performance rights organizations collect for on the composition side of things. Sound Exchange is the organization that collects this income on the sound recordings side of things. It's very important to have your works registered with them. They do have sort of the same sort of vibe as maybe a performance rights organization. They're collecting they split up the revenue that they collect into 2 different buckets. There's one for the copyright owner, and then there's one for the featured artist. So that is the same sort of situation where in publishing, you may split your co-publishing with someone, and that publisher share may go to another party, but you're always going to be entitled to that writer share. Same thing with Sound Exchange when it comes to sound recordings. Your label, maybe your distributor, whatever deal you signed, they may own your copyright, or you've licensed it to them for them to own for a certain period of time. They'll be entitled to collect 50% of that income from Sound Exchange, but no matter what, you're going to be entitled to the other half as the featured artist on the track, which I think is really important. And I think similar to the same things we were mentioning, you can be your own copyright owner. If you're not signed to a label, if no one has ownership of your recordings, you're entitled to that copyright owner share as well. That's, I would say the terminology can also be a little bit confusing if it's not something you're, well versed in, that sort of thing. But that's a really important source of income for all recording artists is Sound Exchange. They are specific to the United States. They have agreements with many other CMOs around the world where they can collect revenue from them with a mandate from your end. So that is something you can opt into to help Sound Exchange collect your foreign royalties when your stuff is played, in another country, all that good stuff. But it is something you need to opt into if that's something you're interested in, something that you feel like you could really benefit from.
I'm just what you're saying there, and just since we're touching on international, when you sign up to BMI, you sign up for the world. We represent you for the world. And the way it works internationally to collect money, if your song gets played in Germany on the radio, there's a PRO in Germany called GEMA, or they're all acronyms, by the way. And GEMA will collect all the information. They send it to us, then we go through it and do all the accounting and everything, and then we spit that back out to you as royalties. And we have agreements, what's called reciprocal agreements, with every society around the world. So everywhere that your music is getting used, they send all that information to us, and then we process it and spit it back out to you as royalties, as the songwriters. So,
Yeah, so definitely sort of in that same vein with Sound Exchange, and I think to go back to just recently when you were talking about the quirk and related to not having royalties paid on film, when it comes to Sound Exchange and the royalties that they collect, it's public performance royalties. You may think that includes terrestrial radio play for sound recordings because PROs collect that for compositions. It does not. Various many historical reasons, whatever, there is no mandate to pay public performance royalties for sound recordings that are played over terrestrial radio, AM/FM radio. There is, there's a movement. There has been for quite some time to try to get this, updated, brought in line with the values and the, systems that we have in sort of the 21st century here with the American Music Fairness Act. Still a work in progress, but that's something that I think a lot of people would like to see passed because it seems a little backwards, doesn't it? Definitely. And I think my only other notes here about Sound Exchange in general is just that in the public performance royalties related to sound recordings is that the Sound Exchange does pay out monthly generally. I've seen some accounts in there paid out quarterly. So that is something that, much like the MLC, doing a great job over there in trying to get people paid as soon as possible. Because, again, they're sort of in the same vein in that, they exist to make sure that this money is paid out. They don't gain anything by sitting on it. It just makes everybody's lives harder. So moving on then, in relation to sound recordings, it's not necessarily called mechanical royalties in terms of sound recordings, but your reproduction royalties. Like you're going to be collecting income from the MLC in terms of your compositions when they get streamed. When it comes to sound recordings, we just sort of maybe refer to that as distribution revenue. That might be something that is a more familiar concept to a lot of people. When you're in Spotify or any of these DSPs or whatever, they play your music. They generally have a negotiated rate with either your distributor, if you're independent, whether you're using any of those independent distribution services, or if you're signed to a label, they've got an agreement with your label that is negotiated to pay you a rate per stream or, per download, whatever the case it is. Most of that stuff, it's got a fixed price, so we know what that is. But that is the extent of reproduction royalties for sound recordings. You get paid, the DSP pays the copyright owner, and that rate's negotiated, and that's about it. It's pretty cut and dry, which can also make it a little confusing on like how to collect and everything. But generally speaking, that's what your label, your distributor, that's what they're there for. They negotiate those rates so that they can pass that along to you. I think in general that hits all of the sort of high notes we were looking to. Is there anything that anyone up here, was hoping to maybe touch on more today, or something that any more wisdom that you want to impart before we maybe start taking some questions here?
Big clock says we have 4 minutes and 29 seconds, so.
Yeah.
I'll just say my 2 cents. It's all about registrations. We're talking about all these different sources of revenue, and especially if you're doing this on your own, it can be a little bit intimidating, but the work is worth it because there's money for you. Just put in the work up front. Make sure all of our organizations have your information because we want to cut you a check.
Yeah, it is all about registrations. I would agree. I will add on on BMI, if you are registering a song and you don't have everybody's information, you can't upload anything unless all the parts equal 100% on the writer and publisher side. So you can't really mess it up if you're doing it your own, because we won't let it upload. I think just having all of your your ducks in a row when you're working with other people, I think is like stuff I would say is very important, on top of just registering your own, knowing who you're working with, where they're registered. If they're not, telling them to register, both with the PRO, the MLC, Sound Exchange, like making sure all those ducks in a row. I meet with people all the time, young up and coming songwriters, artists, and producers, and I'm obviously at BMI, so I'm stressing what they need to do at BMI, but I'm bringing up all of these other places to them because it is important, and all these royalty streams add up to you making more money, then that helps you further your career. So I would just end with that.
Awesome. We do have some questions in here. We might try to rapid fire a couple of them. So this one may be specific for you, Tim, but it's an interesting question that's also near and dear to my heart. It's about DJing and reporting playlists that you play in a venue or whatever to BMI or to the performance rights organizations. What does someone who is more so a performing artist who's using, obviously performing compositions that aren't their own in a venue, what does that process look like to report properly?
I mean, technically, you don't have to report those. The venue you're playing in is already, they're paying us a licensing fee so that you can perform in that venue. And I would just say, like, if you want to say you're performing other people's songs, you can, but you don't have to, because it's already covered under the license of the venue you're playing in to play those songs.
Yeah. I think a more broader question, someone asked, what skills should someone have if they want to work for a PRO / the MLC, expand that to a publisher? Maybe Sam, could you touch on, what do you feel like, your strengths are in where you're at right now? What helped you, get to where you are now?
Yeah, definitely. Just having having an eye for, you don't always know if you're going to. Sometimes there's very specific cases where you're going to catch a mistake. Some working with things like ISRCs, ISWCs. We also have unique codes that are correlated to each song in our database. Just having an eye for the structure of what the structure of
Like a database?
Yeah.
Essentially?
Yeah, like kind of knowing your way around the structure of the database. And it's hard to give you that sort of advice had you not work in it. But I mean, really a golden tool if you really want to get into anything that any of us are doing is Excel.
Yes.
Learn Microsoft Excel.
Get good at it.
And get good at it and learn some have some little tips and tricks in your back pocket, and I guarantee if you're interviewing, they will be impressed if
Yes.
you know a little
You go in
something
there,
something.
know what XLOOKUP is, and can do pivot tables and
Yeah.
stuff. Like, you'll be ahead of some folks that come in there looking for the same thing. And to speak on that, analytical mind, attention to detail, because you're working with large data sets, you're looking with complicated metadata, and it is important to attack it from that mindset and be very watchful so that we can avoid issues.
Can I jump back in on the first question?
Yeah.
Yeah. So I just wanted to add, like, if you're a performing artist, performing your own songs, those are what you do submit to us and get paid for those. So on top of the venue that you're playing at. So if you play a set list at one of the venues here in town, you can, as long as the songs are registered, you can say, I played this venue on this day, I played these 10 songs, they're all registered and then we'll go knock on their door and be like, oh, one of our people played here, one of our songwriters played here, and you have to pay us for those performances, and then we'll pay you that as royalties. And we have a system called BMI Live that you can use to do that. It's really easy, and it has an app, so, yeah. just wanted to touch on that. Sorry.
Awesome. Any final thoughts on your end, or?
I think in terms of, what is a good skill to have for working at a place like the MLC is also patience, because you are working with creators and publishers and songwriters of every stripe, and we're all kind of in it for the same goal. We want to get paid. People bring different levels of knowledge and skill set to the table, and a lot of my day-to-day work is kind of meeting our members where they're at, because they all have the same goal. So trying to synthesize everything I might get from, any corner of the industry on any given day, and just trying to route through all of that royalties to a creator is kind of where the creative work of my job comes in, where the patience and the skill comes in. So yeah, patience, I guess.
Nice. I think that's a good way to phrase it. And yeah, I think by the giant blinking red clock, our time is up here. I really want to thank all of you for coming out. This is a subject that is near and dear to my heart, making sure everybody gets paid what they're owed for their work. It's really important, and I appreciate that all of you are interested in this as well. I want to thank Josh. I want to thank Ohio University. I want to thank all the the folks that built the stage, the event coordinators, and everything. This is such an awesome event, and it's really cool to be a part of, especially as an alumni. So thank you all for being here. Thanks everybody, and hopefully we'll see you next time.
Thank you.